Duncan Rock, a very warm, well, I should probably say very sweaty, sticky welcome back to the Singing Teachers Talk podcast, because we're in a bit of a heat wave in the UK right now, which is not ideal.
We are. You can't smell me from there, can you? Through the internet.
I'm getting something, but
I have just had a cold shower, but um,
it's so needed. It's hideous. I'm not a fan.
you don't like the heat?
Nope, not at all. I am an autumn winter person, which I know makes me a bit of a weirdo, but no, the heat isn't for me.
Okay. For me, I grew up in Perth in West Australia, so yes, I feel that it's warm. I know this isn't top tier heat. No, but I like it. I live in the South Coast, and it's a wonderful place to live year round, but it really comes alive in the summer. I love it. So no, for me, bring it on. I just need lots of sunscreen because of my sort of translucent and pink skin tone.
I'm with you. I'm either lobster or I'm like pale white. My tan is usually white to ivory. I don't
Hey,
do anything else.
nice. That sounds like a Pharaoh and Ball sort of color scheme.
Yeah, it's very beige. We last spoke for our 100th episode on the topic of singing and dairy, and since then you've been a very busy person and doing some very exciting things, haven't you?
Yes, I can't actually remember. Was it about 6 months ago or a year ago? Or
Yes, it was around Easter time.
okay, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I have just got back from France. I was at the Théâtre de Capitole in Toulouse doing a new production of the Britten opera, The Rape of Lucretia, which is a real staple. It has been a real staple in my singing career. I've actually done the opera 6 times, which may be a record. I don't know I may have done this opera more than anyone else in the world, which is cool. Which is, I guess my little mark on the Britain opera landscape. But it was great, and just got back, and I've started some new full-time work in my role as a physiotherapist at a place called the Sussex Back Pain Clinic, which is we sort of do all non-surgical management of spinal pathologies and back pain. So it's been really cool, really exciting to start that.
And I'm looking forward to talking about that a little bit later, because we're here today to talk about exercise and its relationship with singing. So my first question to you is, are you a sports fan? And do you have fond memories of being involved with sports and exercise at school?
Yes, I'm a sports fan, but a weird sports fan. It's a bit of something I wish it was slightly different about myself. I wish I could bond with people over, here in the UK, over football and rugby and cricket. But I've tried to get into rugby in the past, but it just never quite stuck with me. The sports I love NBA basketball, just because, look, I'm 38, and I grew up right in the thick of the Michael Jordan phenomenon when I was a kid. So I just became really interested, and I played basketball throughout my high school years, quite competitively, quite a high level. And the other sport I love is mixed martial arts, like UFC, which I realize comes with a certain stigma because, yes, to a untrained eye, it does look like two people just beating each other up in the middle of a cage, which I guess it is that. But I do jujitsu myself and a little bit of mixed martial arts myself. So when you actually get involved in it, you start to see the subtleties and the nuances of the sport. So I've got quite into that too.
I don't have fond memories of PE at school. The only memory that sticks for me is a sports day when we all had to sign up for something, but I was not the sports person. I did like a bit of high jump because I've got long legs, so that was helpful. But this year, no, they put me in for shot put.
Okay, you don't instantly strike as a natural shot putter.
I'm not a shot putter. I mean, I've got the longest arms known to man. I must be like a direct descendant of Mr. Tickle or something, but they are twigs. They are twig-like things. I mean, it goes without saying I didn't win.
You try your best. That's the important thing.
You know what? I'm not sure I did.
For sport myself, I have a weird relationship with it because I love competing and I love exercising. I know that to some people that sounds really strange, but Some people will completely empathize with that. I have this weird sort of contradiction in that I've always had quite a sort of large, strong body. As I was always like the big kid in school. Even now, when I compete in jiu-jitsu, I'm always like one of the strong guys. I'm tall, I'm kind of broad, but I'm quite mal-coordinated. Do you know, I'm quite gumpy, actually. It's always been the case. So there's a sort of like contradiction of like this relatively use. It's like having a kind of a quite a handy sports car, but someone completely inept at driving it, if that makes sense. So I've always, I've never been great at sports. I certainly never had any dreams of being a professional athlete or anything like that, but enjoyed it. I've always enjoyed it.
So when it comes to exercise, like in my thinking, depending on our own individuality, our physiology, our goals and preferences, we might gravitate towards specific types of exercise, whether that might be cardiovascular or endurance or strength, whatever that might be. But firstly, why might a singer, as both a performer and a human individual, benefit from engaging in exercise?
Sure, it's such a great question. I mean, look, the overarching reason is, of course, because singers are people too, and they benefit from all of the human benefits of engaging exercise. And I was talking about this yesterday at the clinic with my colleagues. Um, I remember an article, I think it was from the New York Times 10 years ago or so, and it was framed like, if you could take a drug that decreased your chance of cardiovascular disease by 82%, I'm making these numbers up, but they're in the ballpark. If it increased your chances of decreased your chances of dementia by 42%, decrease your chances of diabetes by 70%. Sure, would you take that drug? And of course you would. It almost sounds too good to be true. But of course, that drug is exercise. Exercise increases your cardiovascular health. It increases your metabolic health. It increases your neurological health, your musculoskeletal health, your digestive health, your mental health. Really, really overlooked. It basically decreases your risk of what we would refer to in medicine as all-cause mortality, dying of any cause. So it really is one of the best things one can do on a daily or several times a week basis to increase both your health span and lifespan. So your lifespan being the number of years you live, and the health span, the quality of those years, how healthy you are, and for what proportion of your lifespan. The issue I encounter is in, I guess, culture, in the way we often talk about exercise. People immediately think about the aesthetics, weight loss. I need to lose some weight. I better exercise. Or I want to, young guys, I want to get jacked. I better exercise. Now, look, these things are fine, and of course, exercise can help you achieve those things. But the other benefits that I just listed are by far and above the real reasons one should engage in exercise. And of course, so singers are people too. So essentially, if you want to live a long life and you want the quality of those years to be high in terms of your health, exercise is one of, some would say, the best thing you can do to achieve that. I mean, for me, that should be enough to encourage people. But there are singer-specific benefits to exercise. Obviously, I mean, it depends what type of performer you are, what type of shows you do, but being strong and having good cardiovascular health can be valuable on stage if you're doing anything that is physiologically demanding, while you're also, creating your art, being a performer. The example I often give for myself is one role I've sung a lot in my career is the role of Don Giovanni, Mozart's Don Giovanni. And the very first scene of the opera is you sort of get caught with one of the ladies and her dad catches you, and then you have a sort of fight. If it's a traditional production, normally it's like a sword fight. If it's a more modern production, maybe you just beat each other up, whatever. But some sort of physical interaction, which is quite vigorous and quite long and, with some heavy singing. And then suddenly there is this change after you kill the father to this very, very quiet, slow, pianissimo singing. And if you're out of shape and out of breath from doing that first scene, the sword fight or whatever it is, being able to sing that pianissimo music, it doesn't matter how good your technique is. If you're out of breath and you're up here and you're panting, you won't be able to do it. It's just impossible. So in that sort of scenario, I know that's a very specific example to that opera, but of course there are many examples we can think of where that would be appropriate. So that's one benefit. The second is just somewhat related to that, but just functional task abilities. If you train well it's an overused term, unfortunately, in fitness culture now, but if you train what I would describe as a functional way, full range of motion, big exercises, actually becoming systemically stronger, systemically more fit, you just get better at doing things in life. You get better at carrying the shopping bags. You get, for me, we were just talking about, I get much better at carrying my daughter around Disneyland when she's tired. That sort of thing. Walking up the stairs, functional task abilities improve dramatically with exercise, dramatically. It's one thing in my anecdotal experience, people mention it with quite surprise when they start exercising. They go, oh, I didn't realize how easy it could be to walk up the stairs at work. And then they start exercising a bit and suddenly it feels like nothing, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful power you give yourself. The other one that I often relate to people is the healing of tissues. So exercising, for some people somewhat counterintuitively, actually decreases the time it takes for your body tissues to recover from strenuous work. So you can sort of do more again, the next day. Because obviously your blood flow tends to improve, your metabolic health improves. So cellular healing improves the fitter you are. We now specifically know from some relatively recent research that this also relates to the vocal tissues. So people who have high cardiovascular health as measured by VO2 max, their vocal tissues recover more quickly. So if you're a musical theater performer doing 8 shows a week, high cardiovascular health is going to be one of the key factors to keeping you going for longer and stopping that vocal fatigue from setting in. Of course, alongside good technique and hydration and avoiding smoking and all those things you do, but good just systemic cardiovascular fitness will help in that regard. So those are the reasons. I hope I've convinced some people that it might be a good idea.
Yeah, definitely, I reckon. What is generally important for singers to consider then when they're making their choice of what exercise to engage with?
There are quite a few considerations, and it can be valuable in this regard to get some specific work done, like with someone like myself or a trainer who really knows what they're doing. I have one colleague of mine who's wonderful, Claudia Hodgson-Rodriguez, she was a stage manager. We studied together at the Guildhall, but she's also a professional, like bodybuilder, sort of bikini model and personal trainer. And she works now specifically with performing artists. So she really knows what she's doing. Performers should be mindful of what I would call like the 3 pillars of fitness, which is, of course, strength, mobility, and then, of course, cardiovascular endurance, cardiovascular fitness. I would caution singers from becoming too specific in their exercises. So singers who only do yoga or only run or only lift weights, because if you only train your body to do one activity, you'll get this sort of over the years, you'll get sort of hyper adaptation to that activity, often to the detriment of the other capacities. So if somebody only does yoga, great, they might become very flexible, but it might be at the expense of their cardiovascular fitness or their actual strength. Their joints might become so mobile, they actually become weaker. Likewise, if someone only focuses on strength, they might get really, really big and strong, big, hypertrophy, a big growth in their muscles. But at the expense, we see this all the time in gyms, at the expense of mobility of the joints, or perhaps they don't train their cardiovascular system at all. And then, of course, if someone just does cardio, that's great, but if you do just cardiovascular fitness in the absence of any sort of strength training, you're only sort of attacking one piece of the puzzle and you're missing out on a whole plethora of benefits. So the first thing I would get singers to consider is address each of those modalities, each of those sort of pillars in at least some way. You don't have to become an expert yogi and a professional powerlifter and run marathons, but think of all three pieces of that puzzle. But of course, the main thing is it has to be sustainable. One experience that a lot of people relate to is they pick a goal, which is good. I'm going to run a half marathon. I'm going to do couch to 5K. Whatever it is. I'm going to climb mountain X. And then they do it, and that's it. Then that's it. They've lost the motivation. They stop. Oh yeah, so many people came to me. Oh, I ran half a marathon 5 years ago. Just really impressive. But training to run half a marathon once, maybe it takes you 6 months, maybe it takes you a year. It's going to give you some benefit, but over the course of a lifetime, it's a blip. It doesn't really mean much. The program has to be sustainable. So I guess for a lot of people, it's this balance between something that you enjoy enough that you're going to just keep coming back to it, enjoy the process of it. But it also has to be considered because your body is important. You don't want to start developing. Now, I need to be cautious when I say this because, in my opinion, with respect to all the wonderful singing teachers out there, this is something a lot of singing teachers misunderstand and get wrong. They talk about you can't lift weights because it's going to, I don't know, ruin your voice. I don't know. You can't, watch out. You can't have a six pack. Singers for some reason get obsessed with six packs. Performing artists, singers do need to be mindful of not developing muscular imbalances that may lead to excessive tension and high threshold strategies, which just means sort of the overworking of muscles unnecessarily in the body, because that may, over time, start to impact the vocal mechanism.
Can we talk about some of these specific exercises then? So you mentioned the abs there, and it is one that does come up quite a lot. So when I think about musical theatre, there are many roles really where somebody might be in costume, which is either skimpy or barely there. Just thinking about Kurt and Ram from Heathers, they're in like little budgie smugglers, and people in Mamma Mia, they're on a beach mostly, so they're in trunks or bikinis or swimming costumes, and they might choose to train their body in a particular way or want a physical six-pack. So is it allowed? Is it okay? And how do we best train it if that's our goal, where it isn't going to be detrimental to us?
Yeah, it's a great question, and with some nuance. Is it allowed? Yes. What we're about to talk about, there's a sort of bigger issue, or perhaps a separate issue about body pressures on performers, body image pressures and stuff, which I think is a valuable conversation to have. To be honest, it's not really my area of expertise. I'm not a psychologist, I hear those arguments, but that's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about someone who's like, do you know what? I'm in Mamma Mia. I'd like to look a certain way. That's my choice. It's not coming from a bad place. It's just, I want to get in better shape. Absolutely fine. Absolutely allowed. The visibility of the six pack, the rectus abdominis muscle, is purely a function of the level of adipose tissue in the midsection. So people who you can't like see their abs, it doesn't mean they don't have abs, of course, it's just covered by adipose tissue, by body fat. We've all seen, I have children, so, I go to the park and stuff. We've all seen kids, little kids who have six packs because they just have low body fat. So their muscles just sort of show under the skin. The offshoot of that, which is really important for singers to understand, is there is no relationship between the visibility of the six pack and its rigidity or flexibility. So if you can see someone's abs, it gives you no indication of if they're rigid or flexible. In the same way that if you can't see someone's abs, it gives you no indication of if they're rigid or inflexible. And I think in my experience, a lot of singers, particularly singing teachers, think, oh, if you can see the abs, it means they're tight. It's absolutely not true. Not true at all. And in fact, there is some suggestion, I wouldn't worry about it, but, just to sort of finally, put an exclamation mark on the point. People who have higher levels of adipose tissue around the midsection, around the belly, are more likely to have a rigid and inflexible rectus abdominis because of the extra pressure exerted in order to stabilize. So this sort of myth of like, if you've got a six pack, it means you're tight, it means it'll affect your singing, is not true. However, I would say there are certain exercises that one might do, that what people tend to do to try and emphasize that six pack. So say someone's pretty fit, they've got their body down to a relatively low body fat percentage. For a man, like 12 to 16% is when you start to see abs. For a woman, maybe 18 to 20%. And they go, actually, do you know what? I'd like them to pop out a bit more. I'd like a bit more abs. So they think, okay, well, maybe I'll grow them a bit. So they do a lot of crunches, sort of lie on the ground and sort of gyrate on the floor. Now, in my opinion, the crunch is a pretty low grade exercise anyway. You rarely see athletes doing crunches. You're sort of just moving your rib cage towards your hips. It's not a particularly athletic or valuable movement. But the other thing is, people do it because it's quite an easy movement, to just lie on the floor and do a crunch. People end up getting very good at it, and they do thousands of reps. I remember a colleague of mine used to brag that he got up every morning and did 1,000 crunches. I think it's because he saw it in American Psycho, and Christian Bale was like super jacked in that, so he wanted to do the same. There's a logic to it, but not actually great advice. If you're doing thousands of this slightly weird movement, bringing the ribs down towards the pelvis, you're very likely, in my opinion, to develop a pattern overload. You're sort of essentially training those muscles to become shortened. And particularly because people do these thousands of reps of crunches in absence of training the opposite muscles, the muscles of the back, the erector spinae muscles, the multifidus muscles, these muscles that work the opposite, move the spine in the body into extension, which is basically like leaning backwards. Often what we do at the gym is we overtrain the muscles at the front of the body, which tend to lead into flexion, curling up into a ball, in absence of the muscles that open the body up into extension. For a singer, this is not great. You don't want to do this because you'll have these short, tight abs. In my experience personally, and working with performers, this can impact your ability to do that splat breath. You sing a really, really long phrase, run out of breath, and you've only got 20% of a second to take a breath and sing another really, really long phrase. You don't want shortened, sort of rigid abdominal muscles if this is what you have to do. So don't do crunches is the short way of saying that 45-minute explanation I just gave. I don't think it's necessary. To have abs, a six-pack, as I said, it's all about body fat percentage. So get your diet in check and do exercise to lower your body fat percentage. If you want to train the core musculature, I would recommend what we call sort of like anti-rotation or stabilization exercises. I'm going to throw out some words now, but things like the Pallof press is pretty good. Basically, if you, which people can just look up on Google, it'll come up, but basically often it's sort of isometric holding type exercises can be really valuable because this sort of trains the muscles in the way they're supposed to be used. In general, the core muscles actually prevent movement. They don't cause it. Do you know what I mean? We do a squat or we do a lunge or we run. And actually, when you run, the core musculature stops you from over moving. It prevents movement in a way. It does both. It does cause some movement, but it also works against it. So training the core up on the feet is probably a good idea because that's how the muscles are supposed to work. Training with anti-rotational style exercises. If people are interested in specific ones, if you look at something like a Woodchop, something like a Kettlebell halo, if you just type these into Google, they will come up. Something like the Pallof press. These are all wonderful functional exercises. But actually, if you have a balanced and well designed workout program that focuses on, for the strength element, big compound exercises, some type of hip hinging pattern, like a squatting pattern, like a squat, kettlebell squat, something like that. some type of hip hinging pattern, like a deadlift or a Romanian deadlift, or something like that. Some sort of pressing patterns with the upper body, bench press, push-ups, pressing overhead. Some sort of pulling patterns for the upper body, pull-ups, rows, pull downs on the machine. These sort of big functional compound exercises. These all train the core muscles extremely well. In fact, if you do like a muscle activation test when people are doing pull-ups, the abs light up. I mean, it activates the core more than a lot of core exercises. So functional training of the abs is, for most people, sufficient to get them healthy, strong, and also, yes, aesthetically visible.
Is there any relationship between doing crunches and exacerbating reflux in a singer?
It's such a good question. I'll be honest, I don't know. I've looked into it and I'm yet to see anything particularly compelling in either direction. Maybe, but like, I guess I sort of stopped looking into it because I don't recommend it anyway. So it's like, well, I've already said don't do them. The other element, if we need to dissuade against crunches, is people do tend to get quite tight in the neck when they sort of turn it into a neck flexion exercise or a sort of neck tension building exercise, which of course, once again, for singers, it's not great. And also this is something I'm really focusing now in my work at the spinal clinic. Really important for singers is the ability to breathe through the exercise and a deliberate breathing pattern. This is something that people who do Pilates, people that do yoga become very proficient at. They're inbuilt into the modalities. If you're with a good yoga instructor, not someone who did, a weekend course, in Barcelona once, but someone who really knows what they're doing, they will direct the breathing pattern that goes along with that particular movement, and it's designed. This is a problem with other exercise modalities, weightlifting being one of them, strength training being one of them. People tend to hold their breath because they think it's going to make them stronger. In my opinion, there are a couple of breathing patterns that can work for singers. In my opinion, the best one is you sort of get into position to do this one repetition of the exercise. You might do 10 repetitions in a set. You breathe at the top of the repetition. Let's say, just for ease of explanation, let's say we're doing a bench press where you're lying on your back and you've got a bar and you're sort of pressing it. So the bar's up, your arms are extended. You take a deep breath. As you lower the bar, you lower it slow and controlled with a controlled out breath. Nice and controlled. This will mean you're lifting sub-maximal weights for you, but who cares? You're still going to get stronger. It's going to be healthy. Then at the bottom of the rep, you take another deep breath in, and then you complete the concentric, the lifting phase of the repetition, pressing the bar off your chest. Again, nice and slow and controlled with a slow exhalation of breath. This will mean it's impossible to develop tons of muscular tension in the neck and traps and so forth while you're completing these repetitions. And to be honest, in my experience, it's even if that particular pattern doesn't work for you, like for some people, they like to breathe at the top of the rep, lower the bar, and then push it back up all in one breath. That's fine too. But it's the deliberateness that's really important. It's how do I breathe during the pattern of this exercise is really important. And it needs to be consistent. It needs to be considered. Otherwise, you're just sort of all over the shop and you get high and tense, and that's no good.
Can we talk about HIIT and LISS? So HIIT being high intensity interval training and LISS being low intensity steady state exercise. What are the differences, and is there a more optimal choice there?
HIIT is kind of sexier, sprinting up hills, carrying a sandbag.
It's not sexy when I do it.
Yeah, it's marketed as sexier.
Yes.
Yeah, it's and it can be fun. I mean, if you're a bit of a masochist, HIIT, go, like it's sort of CrossFit-y kind of, and it's great. I would say the benefits of HIIT is it's more time efficient because you just can't do it for very long. For some people, it can be fun. You can try all kinds of fun things, running up a hill, carrying a sandbag, whatever it is, doing burpees if you're into that kind of thing. If you hate life. Um, the obvious detriment is that it is synonymous with form breakdown of, so if you're doing like 100 burpees or whatever, as fast as you can go, that's the whole point of HIIT. It's about fatiguing the body. It's impossible to fatigue the body and not have the form breakdown. It doesn't matter how good you are at an exercise, because if you're really good at the exercise, you just go harder, right? Because it's HIIT, and then your form breaks down. So it does tend to be more synonymous with injury, which obviously everyone should avoid, but particularly singers. You don't want to miss a performance tonight at the Royal Opera House because you were sprinting up a hill this morning. I mean, you lose thousands of pounds of income. It's crazy, you know? And also, it does have a neurological recovery cost. It's more taxing on the body. And, performers in my, certainly when I was traveling the world, going from here, there, everywhere, I did find there was a sort of total neurological fatigue that I had to consider. I couldn't like get up early and absolutely smash it in the gym and then rehearse all day and then, do the other work I was doing. And if you're also sort of adding sprinting up hills to that, your chances of getting sort of burned out increases. Uh, because it's by its definition, it's going to failure. It's going to your max. So those would be the detriments. Lists, I mean, I might be sort of just because I'm getting a bit more mellow in my middle age, but I would say for the majority of people, lists is probably a better option. The main detriment of lists is it's just a bit more time consuming, but yeah, it's the best way to train the heart, the cardiovascular system, is through low intensity, steady state cardio, 30 to 60 minutes at a sort of moderate intensity. People often talk about the talk test. You should be able to hold a conversation while you're, whatever it is, running being the obvious one, jog. You should be able to hold a conversation, but you shouldn't want to be talking. It should be a bit uncomfortable. If you are so exhausted, so working so hard that you're talking like this and you can't, get more than 3 words out, that means you're going too hard. That's more HIIT. But if you're so chilled out that you could, recite Shakespeare or something, or sing a little Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, you're not working hard enough to get the training effect needed. This intensity of training basically works the heart in the optimum way to increase its health and functionality, its efficiency. Its efficiency. So it expands the heart, which is great. Which, I hear your heart and lungs are pretty important. Singing's really important too, but cardiovascular disease being the number one killer of people in the Western world, maybe we should consider it in our exercise routine. Also, it's just there's a higher time cost, but there's just a lower recovery cost. And of course it you can adapt it to your location, to what you like doing, and your fitness level. The modality doesn't matter a huge amount. If you like running, cool. If you like swimming, cool. If you like going in a cross trainer, that's cool. If you like, whatever it is, there are various modalities you can utilize. If someone is really I often work with people who come to me in not great shape. That's the reason they come to me. Look, because they're worried. In fact, I had a new client last night who had a cardiovascular incident. Your list training, 30 to 60 minutes, could be a gentle walk, a slow, gentle walk. That might be enough for you if that's getting you into that talk test, that moderate zone. Then as you get fitter, you might walk for a bit further or just walk a bit faster, 30 to 60 minutes, a bit faster. You need a bit more, you're getting fitter, right? You're getting fitter. So to get that same training effect, you need to go a bit more. Then you've got various options. Some people then switch. The obvious choice is to jogging. They might do something like Couch to 5K and things like that. That's wonderful. But for me, an underutilized exercise and something I love, mainly because I've got like you can probably hear him, a kind of unhappy, hot golden retriever sitting in the corner. Is one exercise I love is they call it rucking, which is basically like a weighted walk. You get a backpack, put once again, depending how strong you are, depending on how fit you are. For me, I'm using about 30 kilos a lot, but I'm pretty big. I've been doing it for a while. And you just go for a walk, and it means you might be walking the same pace, but you're getting more of a training effect because carrying this heavy load, and it really adds up. You do that for half an hour and you really notice it in your, the muscles of your stabilizers, your legs and your back. So this is great for lists. You can just there are a multitude of ways to continue improving and continue getting that training effect, without too much detriment, other than, you need to find that 30 to 60 minutes, whatever it is, 3 times a week, 4 times a week.
I work with a lot of dancers personally, and they're used to working with belly tucked in. They might be doing a lot of ballet, conditioning work, sculpting their muscles. What can we do as singing teachers to help dancers who may have just come from a dance class and are complaining of maybe feeling a bit tight and a bit constricted in the body? How can we help them to get out of that and be able to be free and flexible for their singing lesson?
That's a great question. And I have to admit, I've got some ideas, but I'm just hypothesizing here. I've never given a singing lesson to someone who's just come from a dance class. So please, the umbrella over everything I'm about to say would just take it with a grain of salt, because this is not my expertise. But, some sort of, I wouldn't say like long held stretches is necessarily the right way, but some sort of gentle mobility routine post dance class before going into the singing might be valuable. Probably something that focuses a little bit on upper body mobility. The thing about dancers is they tend to have the opposite problem to a lot of the general population. Most of the general population, they get sort of super kyphosed, slumped shoulders from sitting over a desk, and tight hip flexors and all that kind of stuff. Dancers are so amazing. It's just such an extreme, particularly like ballet dancers, it's such an extreme thing to do with the body. They get all these unusual problems. They get super externally rotated into the hips, almost hyperextended into the lumbar spine. It's like hyperlordosis, so they like almost like sticking their butt out and almost leaning back a little bit, which, this is not great for optimal vocal positioning. They're sort of tight around the upper back, but also hypermobile. It doesn't really make much sense. If you ask them to do standard tests, they can do it. They can sort of push their arms into all the, mobility positions. It would go, oh, wow, that's really good. But it looks weird. It's like, it's not functioning as it should. It's like they almost like force the body into a new. I'll just share a little anecdote with you to illustrate how extreme the body can become. It's something we're actually talking about in the clinic this week. But you can all Google it. I've just forgotten his name, but there's a gentleman, an Indian sort of holy man. If you Google, Indian spiritual man with arm above his head, he didn't have any surgery to achieve this. He just held his arm up there. And now he's had entire muscle wastage of his deltoid and, upper trap on that side, and a fusion of his glenohumeral joint, a fusion of the shoulder joint. Just because his body went, oh, okay, this is the thing I'm adapting to. So he's literally not just changed his physiology, he's changed his anatomy. So it just goes to show, if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over, how much you can change your body. And that brings me back to my point of, if you are going to start an exercise routine, or if you are currently in an exercise routine, are you addressing those 3 elements? Strength, mobility, and cardiovascular fitness. Because if you do all 3, look, that means you're not going to be the best at any of them, of course. But we're not training to be Olympic athletes who also sing. We're training to be singers who are as fit as possible, as strong as possible, with as much health as possible. If you are addressing all those 3 elements, you are as unlikely as you can be to fall prey to that sort of hyper specialization that unfortunately dancers end up falling into. I'm reluctant to say more about it because I don't want to give it any bad advice, but I would like to work more with dancers now, actually, now that I've obviously done my master's in physiotherapy. But sorry to not be able to offer more on that.
No, that's good. Thank you. I'm a bit of a weirdo in that if I see a bruise or have a bruise, I want to press it. because I quite like it. So yeah, that's the weirdo in me. It's a bit like when I see a very squidgy cake and I just want to put my finger in it. I don't know if it's to do with like issues I have around perfectionism. I don't know, but maybe that's something dark I don't want to drag up.
Are you a masochist? Do you like hit training as well?
No, I hate hit training.
Okay, okay.
No, I think it's just the cakes and the bruises.
Case. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
But likewise, I quite like the ache that you get after a workout when there might be some, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's called delayed onset muscle soreness or DOMS.
Perfect. Yeah, perfect.
But what are the potential impacts of DOMS and what's actually going on when we have that? And is it something that we can prevent?
Oh, this is such a good question and something I've been thinking about a lot. What I'm focusing on in my work at the clinic at the moment is the altered motor control patterns that people experience in response to pain and discomfort. And I'm kind of thinking about possible PhD topics, but it does seem that when we're in any sort of pain, we experience a change in motor control of the affected area. And because of regional interdependence, which means like, the neck bone's connected to the foot bone sort of thing, like everything kind of is connected, that, particularly systems, particularly body parts that are close together. So a small amount of discomfort in your hip, which causes a change in motor control, so you might start walking a bit different on that side, might be the cause of your left knee problems down the line, because over the course of thousands and thousands, millions of steps over several years, you will have this sort of imbalance and dysfunction, which causes, some slightly more major injury. So my problem with DOMS is that you might get this persistent sort of altered motor control because you're a bit sore. So, if you're sore around your neck, your upper pecs, shoulders, and then you go to sing that day, you might just be singing with a slightly different technique, which may be suboptimal. And if you want to sing on Broadway or in the West End or at the Metropolitan Opera, you got to be the best in the world. Like all those people singing up there, they're amazing. And so you do have to. We do have to be a little bit more concerned with these sort of elite considerations. It's fine, if you're the only use of your voice is, you're no disrespect to school teachers, amazing, but if you're a school teacher, you're using your voice a lot, but you're not being paid for your voice, that sort of thing. So that wouldn't matter so much. I'm sorry to say this, Alexa, to ruin your beautiful love affair with DOMS.
Okay.
As a general rule, it doesn't mean DOMS is the devil and you need to avoid it like the plague. But as a general rule, I think if once you're in the swing of things, like if you've never worked out before and you go to the gym and do a workout, you're going to be sore. It's unavoidable. But when you're in the flow of a workout program, if you're experiencing DOMS the next day, I would say you've probably gone just a little bit too hard, unnecessarily so. You may have got an extra 1%, 2%, 4% benefit from the workout, but with the consequence of, you saw the next day. Well, although you like that, so that's not a problem. But that potential altered motor control, particularly in a key area like the diaphragmatic kind of area or the neck, for it might. I'm not trying to fearmonger here. I'm talking about optimization. It may not be the best thing for your performing singing. I am a huge fan of there's a guy called Faraz Zahabi. He works in Canada and he has a wonderful, I think it's called TriStar Gym. He works with a lot of mixed martial artists. He was famously trained Georges St. Pierre, who was like the greatest one in the early stages of the UFC. And he says you should never be sore from workouts. And this guy's training people to beat up another person in the cage, so it's pretty hardcore. He's training some pretty hardcore athletes here. And he says something like, he talks about flow state training. So he says, look, if you can do, let's say you can do 10 pull-ups, right? gun to your head, $1 million on the line, you couldn't do 11. 10 is your max, 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 max. You should never do 10 pull-ups. You should do 7 pull-ups, maybe 8, maybe 6, but do a few sets. You get the training effect through the volume, through doing, because if you do 5 sets of 7, you've done a significant volume of pull-ups to sort of have trained those muscles. When 7 starts to feel too easy, then maybe you do 8 or 9. But this probably means that your max has gone up to like 12 or 13. He says, he always talks about, this is another reason. He actually is not so into HIIT training either, because he's like, workouts shouldn't be fatigue seeking. They should have a training effect on the body, a specific training effect, which you then adapt to and come back fitter and stronger. And I like that. Every workout should only push you 1 to 2% more than the previous workout. It should be barely detectable, but over the course of 10 years of training, you've accumulated this incredible improvement in your fitness and strength. I know this is not what a lot of people like to hear, because it requires consistency and dedication, which is hard. I get it. We're all super busy. I mean, gosh, I've got a full-time job. I see private clients. I have a child. I'm about to have another child. I still sing. I get it. I totally understand what it feels like to not have time. But the idea of like smashing it for 2 months to get ready for your beach body for Ibiza is just this is only useful for people who want to sell you supplements and things to make money off you. Like dedication to art, to your craft as an artist, it's a sort of lifetime's work. I was just talking with my new boss actually about, I'm 39 next month, and I've had to contend with the reality that I'm sort of in my sort of optimal physical training. I'm over the hill. I've probably bench pressed my heaviest bench press. I probably, squatted my heaviest squat, that sort of thing. But now I'm on a slightly different journey. Now I want to develop new skills, hence the mixed martial arts and jiu-jitsu. I want to maintain my mobility. For me, is really important as a sort of bigger guy. That can be a real struggle. But it's a lifetime's work. It's a lifetime's work. It's not a 6-month goal and then, okay, what's next?
All right, I'll stop seeking DOMs. I get it.
Oh my gosh, I gave you like a 6-hour essay. You just asked me about DOMs.
But it's good to know because, as a voice teacher as well, if you're demonstrating or using your voice quite a lot in lessons, it's good to know that might not be optimal. So yeah, I'll stop seeking it. I promise.
I promise you will be just as fit and strong and use those wonderful long arms.
Yes, for shot put, I'll get, I'll see me next Olympic level.
Greatest shot putter. Yeah, in my opinion, unnecessary detriment for a minuscule benefit.
Yeah. I wonder if it kind of goes into that no pain, no gain, which I know people like Stephen King despise. We don't have to feel it be sore to know that it's done some good.
Obviously, I will announce my bias. I think Stephen is amazing. I like him personally and professionally. He's great. And I also completely agree with that advice. There are very few examples of, I can't think of any. I'm sure there's people come up with a few, but where something that hurts is, we know it's good for you. I can't, someone can comment on, oh, what about this? I'm sure there is one or two, but generally the feeling of pain isn't, obviously, as we know from new pain, pain science education, it's not necessarily indicative of tissue damage, but it's indicative of a warning, a warning of potential damage. And, I think we have this useful sort of body signaling system, and that's valuable to listen to it.
And as a nutritionist yourself as well, is there anything that you advise singers individuals to consume immediately after a workout?
You might be referring to like the sort of post-workout nutrition window. This was kind of invented by people who sell you post-workout nutrition drinks.
Right.
There's really, so if I worked out this morning, I trained mixed martial arts, and I didn't get to eat breakfast until a few hours after because I had to come home and I had to do a few things and had to drop my daughter at nursery and blah, blah, blah. The difference between me having my breakfast 2 minutes after finish my training or 2 hours is negligible, maybe zero. Perhaps in the absolute extremes. Look, if I had an Olympic athlete, if I was training Usain Bolt, yeah, I'd give him his post-workout shake as soon as the training was finished. Because why not? But no, it's not necessary. Go for practicality. Go for what works for you. Or what matters is hitting the right nutrients, getting enough, eating the right amount of food, getting enough nutrients, the right amount of calories, not too many calories. And now a bigger focus for me, the quality of food, getting your nutrition and your calories from as many whole foods sources as possible, excuse me, minimizing processed foods, minimizing particularly ultra processed foods as much as is practical. It's impossible to completely eliminate them in the Western world, but whole food sources and the right amount of food. Definitely infinitely orders of magnitude more important than nutrient timing.
So now that you've started this really exciting new job, you've been there 4 days now. So what have you seen immediately? What are you looking out for in terms of like the back pain? Is anything maybe related to exercise that you're looking out for or in your research?
Unfortunately, with back pain, one of the reasons it's so prevalent is because it's very variable. So we really do treat each patient like a unique human being because of course, they are unique human beings and deserve to be treated as such and need to be treated as such. There's very few cookie cutter kind of programs. The things for back pain that we know for certain is the back likes movement. Lying in bed all day is bad for the back. And there is something about shifting positions, sort of related to that, sort of point 1B is static positions tend to not be great for the back. So, if you do work sedentary, one thing I use, which I think is great, is a table that goes up and down. So you can stand for a period, you can sit for a period. That is actually really good for the spine. It's not that sitting is bad. It's just that static positions tend to be. And, when we're standing, we tend to shift around and move around a bit anyway. So we kind of naturally eliminate that. When we sit, we really sometimes, like if you watch people sitting, sometimes they look like a statue. They're really kind of frozen. So those are two things that are really important. But actually, in terms of general advice I could offer on top of that, the back responds well to a balanced exercise program that, these things of like, things that you immediately hear, people with back, everyone loves to give advice. We live in the age of everyone has an opinion and loves to share it on the internet. Things you'll hear is if you have back pain, it means you've got a weak core. Not true. Many back pain patients have an overly rigid core. Power lifters often get back pain. These are some of the strongest people on the planet. If a weak core means back pain, why do the strongest people on the planet have back pain? So if you do get back pain, don't start suddenly like gripping your core, to tie your shoelaces. This will cause likely more problems. You hear, oh, I have tight hamstrings. That's causing my back pain. Once again, it might be the case, but it might not be the case. Tight hamstrings can also be, we talk about this thing of like victims and villains. So for example, if I have pain running down my left arm, that might be caused by a nerve root irritation in my cervical spine, in my neck. So the victim is the arm from suffering the pain, but the villain is the cervical spine. So in relating to tight hamstrings, tight hamstrings might be the victim, but the villain might be rigidity in the ankles. As much sort of ambulatory movement as is possible. You know, very few people like take too many steps a day. It just doesn't really happen. Shifting positions, really good, and then a balanced strength program: mobility, strength, cardiovascular fitness. This is good for the back. And of course, if you have specific pathology, disc issues, facet joint issues, sprained muscles, come see, no, it doesn't have to be me, but any professional who knows what they're talking about, and get on top of it. Because, you know, we see people with 30 years of chronic pain because they didn't get on top of it. And it doesn't, you know, it can snowball.
And just remind us where we can find you then, and where's best to get in contact with you for that.
I guess my website is probably the best, duncanrocknutrition.com. I guess I now need to change it to Duncan Rock. It's not very good for marketing. Nutrition and physiotherapy.com. I'll think of something better. I also, so I have a contact form, which just sends me an email. I also sometimes have people approach me directly through Instagram, Duncan Rock Nutrition on Instagram. I'm not so good on social media, so that's not the best way to contact me. Yeah, you know, Google Duncan Rock. There's ways to get in touch. And yeah, and I love to hear from people. I'm getting an increasing amount of people from the industry. You know, I also work with the young artists at the San Francisco Opera on a regular basis, particularly at the moment because they have their Marola summer school program at the moment. So I give seminars for them, and then I work with the artists through the year. So increasingly working with a, you know, kind of performing arts specialized group of people, and I love it because, you know, singers are my people. You know, I did it for almost 15 years, so it's a pleasure to sort of stay existing in this realm.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Duncan Rock, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and this has been a really interesting conversation. So yeah, thank you for your time once again.
It's a real pleasure, Alexa. Nice to chat to you.